Welcome to Founded on Purpose. I'm your host, Kt McBratney. This is the show where you get to know the people behind the companies that are weaving purpose and profit together. They're innovators, founders, creators, movement makers. And today I'm super excited to welcome Julian Walker to the show. He's the CEO and founding team member of PushBlack, the nation's largest nonprofit media organization for Black Americans. They reach millions of people every day. And Julian really knows the power of storytelling, community, and collective action. So I'm so excited to say, Julian, welcome to the show.
Hey, Katie. Thanks for having me. I appreciate that intro. I'm happy to be here.
Hey, I appreciate you being here. And we're going to just dive in with the first of the 8 questions because there's literally no better place to start with you, I think, than asking you, in one word, what's your purpose?
Community.
Obviously, you know, I love that answer. What does community mean to you, and how does it show up in the work that you're doing with PushBlack, but also outside of that role?
To me, community, when I think of community, I think of where I was born and raised first in Little Rock, Arkansas, and community that I was a part of, the community that my family was embedded in. I had the opportunity to witness, my grandfather dedicate his life to the community as a civil rights attorney, as a member of the state legislature, and seeing that we have the ability to shape our own destiny by looking to ourselves as community and by building power in communities, and that individuals can play a role in that, was sort of foundations of where I begin to realize community is not just a place that you live. It's not just a neighborhood. It's the way that people interact and care for care for each other, solve problems, advance their interests. And there's something powerful about that, especially today, when we've become fragmented in many ways, when the world is much more global. It feels like we are connected to things all over the world in ways that we never were. There's something powerful and special about community at a small scale. I'd say a large scale too, but something special about being able to focus on what's around you and try to affect your environment in a way that folks have been doing forever. But it seems that, since we're getting so much more input from the news and media, it's hard. It becomes easy to look beyond community and think about, okay, all these problems are going on elsewhere. And there's valid issues, valid opportunities elsewhere. But I do think that people coming together in community in order to make something happen will never get old to me, at least. And I think that's something that is worth focusing in on and preserving and strengthening.
What I'm hearing in that is that community is power. Community is action, right? It's also deeply personal, without being individualistic. Would you agree?
I would agree with that. And, the way I perceive it is, I don't think it's a new idea, maybe a novel idea, but, I come from the belief system that it's not just about the individual. There's levels of like the individual, the family, the community and service, being in service of the community is the ultimate goal and ultimate priority. And using, your skills and interests and your family's skills and abilities to strengthen and serve the community, to form that environment where there's collective power and strength and opportunity.
And this conversation is happening, we're talking at a moment where community care, community action is very top of mind for a lot of people. And for context, I give a very, 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 very brief version of what y'all do at PushBlack. But I think it's some important context to kind of ground the rest of this conversation and this idea of community in is really the purpose and the day-to-day work that you and the team are doing and the lens at which you are doing that work for and with community. So can you tell us a bit more about what PushBlack is about and the change that you all and us all are trying to have happen through a community?
Yeah. So PushBlack exists to inspire liberating actions in the best interests of the Black community specifically. What that means to us is that we recognize that our community has been under attack since, the idea of us being a community in this country was even an idea. But before that, I'd say, and many ways, physical ways are most obvious, and then the mental ways, the psychological ways are not as obvious. And the latter is what PushBlack largely focuses on. So we use storytelling and narrative to inspire liberating action. A lot of that comes from history and Black history. And the opportunity we saw was that members of our community, they told us when we asked them that, they weren't being served in the Black history, in the package that Black history had been delivered, whether it's through school or through mainstream media. There was something lacking there. So what we did was figure out a way to repackage it from a perspective that was rooted in the love of community and a desire to have us view ourselves in a different way, which is a way that is not solely objects of oppression, but as agents of victory. So we tell stories that, of course, identify traumatic experiences and oppressive nature of existence, but we don't stop there. I think that's where it often has stopped in the telling of this narrative. We go beyond that and identify the stories that help us see that there is a tradition of resilience, resistance, agency, and a lot of that is rooted in culture and Africanisms that we have carried with us, even if they're not overt, and ways of being with each other, ways of joining together in community to advance and defend interests that we have to survive and thrive. So we tell stories rooted in that type of narrative, and we do so using digital media. So we have audiences across multiple platforms. We scaled several years ago through messaging apps. So direct messaging, folks get notifications directly in a pocket when they get a story from us that is essentially like you're texting a friend. We have a character that texts these stories. It's 250 word story. It has pictures and it's interactive. Folks click next, and all that. So we have that format, and then of course from there we expand it out to podcast, to short form video, to social media, so to emails and text messages. So trying to reach folks where they are, realizing that we all see this, folks aren't receiving information in the same ways. So we have to be able to reach them where they are most likely to engage with it in a way that they're most likely to engage. So it resonates in a different way than if they were just to get names and dates through a history book. So that's what we are all about. And, we've been pretty successful with that. And that's the first part of it. That's the media part of it. But underneath that, as a social enterprise, impact is what we are pushing towards as well. So by building this this portfolio of media products that's culture first, we've been able to build trust with our audience. That trust we then leverage to mobilize folks to take actions. So we've been able to mobilize over 3 million folks now over the past 4 election cycles now to take voting actions, folks that otherwise wouldn't have engaged. So we are able to engage with folks who are often not watching the news all day, keeping up with, political analysis podcasts, folks that are just going about their day-to-day lives. We're able to build trust. And then when it comes time to mobilize, they trust us to take that action or to bring their friends in to take action. So we've been able to use media to build relationships and trust that we then leverage to mobilize folks towards action. And over the past 3 cycles, we'll have to see what the numbers look like from the cycle that we currently ended the other day. But over the past 3 cycles, we've been the largest voter turnout organization in the digital space out of any demographic. And that's
wow.
That's power. That speaks to what's possible there. That's not the end goal at all, but that's what we found to be possible and what we're trying to build off of and see how far we can take it to help the community exercise power and advance their interests and make sure their voices are heard, received, amplified, acted on, and all that.
Thank you for that. And congrats. That is a massive impact already. And I know you're not just getting started. The organization has been around for a while, but this is not the end of that work and the end of that impact. You alluded to this as you described PushBlack's approach to both the kinds of story you're telling for and with your community, and also in the formats of these stories. But I want to dig in a bit deeper, or maybe zoom out a little bit more and ask what you feel like right now, given the success you've had with those missed opportunities so far, right? Seizing those opportunities to innovate in storytelling, meet that need, and in format to get it in front of folks, right? And get them interacting with it. Today, what would you say is the biggest single missed opportunity in the field?
I think the biggest missed opportunity is the opportunity to lead with culture. And that, I think, goes for both media and social impact. I think that there's a number of sayings where I think people intellectually may know this, right? The saying of, culture eats strategy for breakfast, or, strategy is downstream from culture. These are things that a lot of people say, but what does that mean and how is it being acted upon? You'll see, there's election 2 days ago. We've been in the midst of it for a while now, and it's interesting. Let me preface this by saying PushBlack is nonpartisan, and we mean that, and I'm nonpartisan, and I mean that. And I think that what we've observed, though, just considering the two different primary political parties, is that there's one side that has got media right and is able to advance their constituents' narratives, and that's largely through culture. Right? You'll see that a lot of the media appearances that Trump and Vance did were outside of the norm, what's been considered the norm. It's, they did like the Joe Rogan podcast and the Theo Von podcast, and they had certain, folks speak at there's like a touch, they've been in touch with the culture, and the culture in a way that made them more relatable to people who were not engaged as much in politics. I don't think this is the reason why results, went one way or another, but it's an interesting observation because the left is behind them in that. And I think what I've observed is that there's been more of a focus on policy and talking points, which for certain audiences that works with, but for folks who aren't really engaged like that, you have to connect on culture and values. And that's what we observe and are trying to do and have been doing and trying to get even better at doing with PushBlack. The idea that it's going to take something that unifies people, unifies communities beyond how can I put it? I'll put it this way. I think culture is more offensive than defensive. Culture is something that is evergreen and unites people, brings people together around a solid foundation, right? If the community shares certain values and has certain practices and beliefs through culture, then any inputs coming at them, they're going to be able to perceive in a way and take action on that's aligned with those values more, I believe, more so than just pure logic. And not to say one is more or less important than the other. I just believe that that's how, that's my understanding of human nature to an extent. And so when folks in the media or the social enterprise space are just focused on issues or messaging or talking points, especially around politics, even if it's not around politics, just something that's going on in the community, trying to get bring people together, it has to hit differently. So it's not it's not just defensive. I think something like the events of 2020, George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, Ahmaud Arbery, and Black Lives Matter movement, things like that, as an example, but this happened throughout history, things like that bring people together around an attack. And there's a defense that needs to be made against an attack, but that fizzles out a little easier. It becomes a moment and not a movement without that unifying force of culture that already has people together that will continue to work together beyond an inciting incident. So that's what I think is being overlooked. And I think that that's a big opportunity for those of us who are more interested in culture, creative people who can find ways to translate and tell stories and connect with folks in a different way, in a more human way than, a number of initiatives or candidates on a on a list or on a ballot. So that's
and culture is like a daily thing. Culture occurs and we experience and participate in it throughout our daily lives versus choosing to engage or disengage. Remove yourself or stay unengaged from the deeper dives and the strategic parts of it, right? And to your point, they're both necessary. And what I'm witnessing, and it's interesting that you brought up that kind of cultural strategy or that cultural insight and plan or execution, I guess I would say. I was reading this article in the information this morning about how influencers or celebrity being on the right kind of podcast, very tactical examples, just using, again, in a nonpartisan way, those two campaigns as examples of adjusting a cultural strategy or demonstrating and using culture as an access point to achieve an outcome. And doing that at the rapid pace of especially how our media culture is changing so rapidly. Like we tend, because we're in it and we're experiencing it, we're living it, we're scrolling on our phones all the time. Like just a few years ago, most adults weren't on TikTok or using short form video. Just, a decade ago, the idea of having meetings primarily through Zoom was unheard of for most. And so I think that like culture changes rapidly, partially because of technology. And also, to your point, parts of culture are evergreen. And it's really how organizations and how movements balance and use that. I love how you frame that as offensively versus defensively, right? To sustain it, to sustain a movement versus a moment.
For sure. And I agree with that. Culture changes rapidly, and it's a necessity to also not be fixed. For culture can't be fixed. It has to be fluid. And so I think the values probably are even, the values that inform the culture are even more evergreen, but the ways that culture manifests are a little more fluid. And I think they have to be, because the world is fluid and moving. But the occasion might call for a different way of being or believing or interacting. But I think that still can maintain, a community can still have staying power if that is rooted in values that are meaningful to them and that they have seen evidence that, can allow them to thrive and survive. So yeah, that's overlooking that element, I think is dangerous in a lot of ways and takes out it ignores the people element of it. I think it turns people into just numbers and demographics, and that's not, I don't think that'll be effective overall. And it's not fun either. So,
and it's not, that's like the opposite of community centered or community led. And I just want to acknowledge to folks that this is a little bit different of an episode. And Julie and I talked prior to hitting record about, given this state, the emotional and the complexities around a pivotal election happening, whether or not we wanted to record today, right? Holding space for everyone and very much centering community and self-care in that, and decided that it was as important, if not more important, to have these conversations. So we may or may not get to all 8 questions, which I know I could sit and talk to you all day, but you're a busy man and have things to do. So just know that we're kind of feeling out the right conversation to have for this moment with this brilliant mind with us. And I'll also say that those nuggets about values and culture and community, you just gave a 3-minute masterclass in storytelling. And so folks, get out your checkbooks or Venmo and send. You just got a very valuable lesson from an expert in this field.
Oh man, I don't know if I'd say all that, but I appreciate it. What question are we on? Because I can be quite long-winded. I'm gonna try. Let's see. But I've also been practicing being concise. So let's see. I want to challenge myself to see how we can make the most meaning within the rest of the questions.
Also, I will say these, given the context, if you had one word answers, I would be surprised and a little concerned. Like these are nuanced topics that we're getting into. So like, also like, it's my show. We can break the rules if we want. We can also do a rapid fire and towards the end if we've got a few left. So it's the beauty of autonomy and creative control, right?
Absolutely. All right.
Let's do it. Well, I'm curious, like we've talked about some heavy things already that are necessary and we need to hold space to have those conversations, especially when they are uncomfortable, because change and growth only come through discomfort. And I want to highlight some of the positive things.
Great.
What was your most recent win? And this can be personal or professional.
I love that. Appreciate the question. I'd say personal win. I think I've learned how to be a better apologizer, and my wife is teaching me that. So that is a personal win. I think I underestimated the power of a simple apology, and I think that it's helpful both personally and professionally. Like, hey, I dropped the ball on that. I'm sorry. This is what I think I can do to make it right now or going forward. I think I'm learning the value of that more. So I'd say that's a win.
I would too. And also a wonderful invitation for all of us to reflect on the role and our kind of experience and skills around apologizing, because lots of us are very bad at it.
Yeah.
Myself included at times.
I think we hold on to, I'll speak for myself for sure. There's a need to, not a need, I feel like I want to be right more often than I need to be right. And sometimes it's not about being right or wrong. It's just, it's something different. So I'm learning. I'd say that's a win. I finally have figured out what that takes for me and why it's important or not important for me. And it's more peaceful. And I'll speak about inner peace. It's more peaceful trying to just be like, hey, I messed up, than trying to figure out, okay, well, what, how can I put it? To put it succinctly, it just brings more inner peace than trying to find a way that I am right and not wrong.
It's not about winning. It's about the relationship is part of what I'm hearing come through.
Yeah, for sure.
The next question I want to pivot to that I feel like is semi-related is this idea that like you're doing incredible and hard work that's multifaceted, multimodal, right? Like you're in lots of places. You're also, you have a family, you have a life outside of work. We know scientifically and culturally the value that play brings, right? It's rest, is it peace, is it growth in a different way, creativity, learning, all of that. Play is valuable. I'll just end there. What does play look like for you, knowing that you're running a company and doing all these other things?
Got to find moments of joy and release and something that will not necessarily serve as a distraction, but something just to, bring you that peace without having to worry about, in my case, all things of running a business. So recently, my wife and I celebrated our anniversary last month, and we took
Congrats.
Thank you. We took a trip to Vegas, and neither of us drink. So our experience there this year as adults, well, we used to drink, our experience there this year as adults different than what it may have been back in the day. So we had to challenge ourselves to find different ways of having fun. And there's this adult play place, right? Folks who have kids, take your kids to a play place. They run and jump and slide down the slides and play the games, and it looks like a lot of fun. But it's usually not as much fun. Trying to make sure they don't break their neck or anything. So we found one that's just for.
I have a 6-year-old, very relatable.
You know how it goes. Yeah, I have a 6-year-old as well, so I definitely know how it goes. But yeah, so it's the same concept. It's just everything is much bigger. And so I was, trying to, there's all these games there. So we did that. I won't get into all the games, but we did that. And then this weekend for my birthday, want to go-kart racing. So I'm going go-kart racing, and I plan to have a blast. So things like that are remind me that, there's a lot that could be worried about and could be done, but finding things that help release that in whatever healthy way that looks like to a person is necessary.
And this work is like, it's a marathon, not a sprint. And you do need to have those moments, those releases, those moments of joy and play.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it's all hard and it's all work.
Yeah,
and
for sure.
That's one good path to burnout if anybody's looking for an express train to that.
That is,
but I do not recommend.
Definitely that, and you're so right. Marathon, not a sprint. Got to take those moments. Got to take those breathers. So yeah, those are a couple ways that I have recently, and will take a breather myself.
Now I'm like, there should be more of those adult scale play places because it looks so fun. They're just my kid will just hurtle herself into like a pit of foam.
Yeah.
Not knowing how deep that is, not knowing if there's another kid underneath something, but they just go. And
still
that kind of just unabashed, unapologetic joy.
Yeah.
Right. And being in your body too. We live so much on screens, whether it's on a video call or reading something or even scrolling on our phones, and the ability to just be in your body and share it with someone you love and play without restraint is beautiful.
Absolutely. It's much necessary. I think it's, I don't know. I know it's been underrated for me, but we're trying to find ways to practice that more and make it, put it at the right place in our lives. So, yeah.
You are in a space where on the nonprofit side, on the social impact side, on the media side, a lot of people have opinions, whether or not they are informed or valid or helpful or even asked for. How do you, as a CEO, as a leader, as a person, how do you know what advice to take and what to hear and let go of? How do you navigate that process or what's your relationship to that like?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So is the advice intended to help get us closer to the goal? That's the advice that's the most valuable. And that's something that I learned in film school. So I went to grad school for screenwriting and directing. We'd have to give feedback on our classmates' work, give and receive feedback. And what we came to realize was that it's easy to get into the thing of, okay, well, why did you should have shot it like this. That would have been much better. You should have made them say this. That would have been much better. But a lot of that is rooted in personal preference without a shared understanding of what the goal and the intention is. So being able to align on, okay, this is what trying to achieve, right? So in that shared being able to say, okay, I was trying to achieve this with this line or achieve this with this shot. Does that work and does it not work? And then take the input that makes the most sense to make it better and to get it closer to what that intended outcome is. So the same thing applies with business. And there's a lot of parallels between, being a director on a film set and the leader of a company. Excuse me. It starts with that goal. What is the intent? What are we trying to achieve here? And does this feedback help to achieve that? And so that's the most helpful. And then I have to make sure I'm doing the work of seeking that as well, and not holding on to a certain idea or path without the input of folks that I've brought on to provide their expertise and their insights. So being able to give and receive in alignment with the intended, the goal is how I view that.
That's such a wonderful example of how having different experiences, different educational backgrounds, different fields that you've worked in, right? Everybody knows I love a non-linear path or a non-conventional path. And you can make arguments that, of course, it makes sense that you went to film school. What I love about that specific example is that it shows that the transfer, that great processes, great leadership, great strategies, all of that can come from different places, right? The source of where you learn a lesson or a practice can come from almost anywhere. And it's really about how you interpret and then apply that to different areas of your life or not. And I think it's really fascinating because in the tech world and even within the social impact and the social space, people sometimes have their blinders on and they have tunnel vision and they read their business books, they read the lean startup, they read these, they stick into their fields. I often feel that that's so limiting, right? It limits our imaginations and it limits our potential outcomes because we're artificially putting up these constraints like it didn't come from business school, so you can't apply it to business.
Yeah.
To which you just masterfully disproved. And I think that's the beauty. I think that comes through with community as well, is those lessons and seeing how community can teach you about yourself, even not just the process of giving and getting feedback, but teach you about yourself and the lessons you need to receive or can apply is really a beautiful practice. And the creative fields, are filmmaking, especially since we both have lived in that world, is a wonderful kind of microcosm of that in functional and also in dysfunctional ways. Because some of us broken, we know.
Yeah.
But have you ever thought about how your journey to where you are today and the role that you're in today does what would 18-year-old Julian think? What would 12-year-old you think? Would he be like, of course, this makes total sense? Or do you think he'd be surprised?
I don't think he would be surprised. No. I think my thing is, just as you described, connecting the dots, different experiences, different inputs. My perception on the world has never been, just cut and dry. This is the thing, and this is the only thing, which can be. So no, the short answer is no. That can be confusing to some people, though. I try to bring, because you try to bring references in from outside of the space we're in. If everyone's not on that same type of time, then there's a translation that needs to occur. So I'm trying to get better at the translation, because I might see how the dots are connected, but that doesn't mean everyone does. So that's sort of the mode that I exist in, and I could see how 12 or 18-year-old Julian would say, okay, I understand how that guy ended up there because of these dots being connected. So yeah.
And it sounds like the values are still the same, much like we talked about within community and culture. The values have stayed evergreen. It's just adjusting and moving with culture and media and the moment, right? Collecting those dots and connecting them and carving your path versus following a prescribed one on autopilot.
In a sense, that's actually interesting. A lot of the values probably have stayed the same. I've adopted others, but I think the purpose has remained the same for sure. being able to, from a young age, observe and say, I'm trying to use my talents in the interest of the community. That purpose has been evergreen, and my understanding of what it means to do that has adjusted over time, and had to shed certain values and acquire new ones. And I'm sure there's many core ones, or maybe even just a few core ones that are still there, which have brought me into different communities that have, aligned values, and I've taken myself out of other communities that didn't have aligned values. So I think the purpose is probably the most evergreen within that framework.
Growing up and growing into yourself is such a fascinating journey, right? Like that's just what it makes me think about, is like this, and we're not done, right? We're not done until we're done. So that process of living with your values and shedding some that no longer serve you and your purpose, and adding others is just such a beautiful reflection of how we are all works in progress. And I like to believe most of us are just trying our best at this whole life thing.
Yeah.
So I know you wanted to get through all the questions. Fun fact, there's only one left, because through just the natural kind of flow of our conversation, you answered 2 without me even asking.
Yeah, love it.
So look at that.
I got time for one more. Yeah, let's do it.
Last question's where we end it with everyone. It's twofer. What is the most challenging part of your job? Like the part that you're like, yes, this seems glamorous, but I've got to do this. And what is the best part of what you do that you're like, if I get to do this once a week, every day, or whatever it is, it like lights you up and carries you through the hard moments?
Cool. The most challenging, I'd say, is the most draining, the most life-taking is the administrative parts. And it's funny because as a kid, that's what I thought being a leader of a business was. I used to go into, walk into Office Depot and Staples and imagine, I got this office with all these things and I'm, doing office stuff. And I
thought there'd be more clipboards.
Likewise. Don't really have a use for clipboards. I bought one a couple years ago and I had it on a legal pad, but I don't use it now. But yeah, so the admin stuff is draining and it's hard. It's annoying. I was on the phone with the bank earlier, right before this call, trying to handle something. I'm like, that is draining and I don't like that. And then the best part is the creative aspects of it. And I say that in a way that's not, so I don't write stories for PushBlack. I used to. When we first started, I was writing the stories, then I was managing the writers and all that stuff, but I don't do that anymore. But I still have that, I'm just generally a creative person. So I have had to find ways to lean into my creativity in what could be just an administrative role without a certain approach. So being able to spend my day either reading or experiencing. So whether I'm reading something of interest and connecting dots, as we were talking about, and writing down new ideas and seeing how things connect to a challenge or opportunity we're facing, putting that into strategy, or just being in the community. So I live in a community that I love. And so just being able to get out of the house and interact and engage with people, or just people watch and overhear conversations of what people care about, gives me necessary inputs as well. And that comes with talking to our subscribers, our audience. I'll still call folks up on the phone on a pretty regular basis just to understand what they what's working for them with what we're putting out, what's not working. So taking in inputs and being able to connect dots and get creative in that way, and then apply it to the work and say, okay, now I see, and that's another piece that I can add to the vision and something that we could potentially try or test as part of the the strategy. That's what I would prefer to spend all of my time on instead of talking to the bank. The bank that
Stuck
will
in
not
bureaucracy.
Yes, absolutely.
The nightmare. Well, I can say this has been an absolute wonderful break from the administrative stuff I have to do later. So
Nice.
thank you for that. I hope it's true for you as well.
Likewise.
And where can folks find you and PushBlack on the internet? How can we find you, stay in touch with the work, and get connected to the work that you're doing?
So you can find me on LinkedIn. Just search my name and PushBlack and you'll see me. And then you can find PushBlack wherever you prefer to you can find PushBlack wherever you prefer to consume your media. So if you're a newsletter person, we got that. We got podcasts. We got social media, but you can go to pushblack.org, pushblack.org, and that'll take you to all of our brands. Or we are PushBlack on Instagram, which seems to be a favorite of many people. So
it's a great feed. You got some good reels this week, by the way.
I appreciate that.
I was learning a lot and I loved it. So pass that message along.
I will.
Julian, thank you so much. This has been so insightful, just such a gift to connect with somebody and have this conversation in public that we can share with folks. That's been very thoughtful and heartfelt and so community-centered. So I appreciate the time and I appreciate you.
Thank you, Katie. Happy to be here. I appreciate you inviting me. And giving a chance to chat with you is cool. So I look forward to the next time. And I hope somebody gets at least one thing from this conversation.
My friend, I think if somebody leaves with just one thing, they clearly were not listening. I'll say, I feel like that's the way. That's my takeaway.
Nice.